Budapest, Hungary, August 1946. A school teacher named Margit has spent her entire career saving. She was disciplined. She was cautious. She did everything the financial culture of her country told her to do. She kept her savings in the national currency, the pengo. She trusted the institution. At the peak of Hungary's hyperinflation, prices were doubling every 15 hours. The monthly inflation rate for July 1946 reached 41.9 quadrillion percent, the most extreme hyperinflationary event in recorded history, according to the Hungarian National Bank's own records. On August 1, 1946, the forint replaced the pengo at a conversion rate of 400 octillion pengo to 1 forint. Margit's life savings could not buy a single postage stamp. The man 3 houses down from her, a hardware shop owner named Tibor, had spent the previous year doing something his neighbors thought was reckless. He had been converting every spare pengo into physical inventory. Nails, copper wire, pipe fittings, hand tools. Objects with utility. Objects the state could not reprint overnight. When the new currency arrived, Tibor's inventory was worth real money. Margit had nothing. Most people look at Hungary 1946 and think, that cannot happen here. That was war. That was extreme. That thinking is precisely the mechanism through which the same theft, slower, quieter, more technically sophisticated, has been running inside every major economy on Earth for the last century. Without a single law broken. Without a single official admitting it exists. Here is what decades of monetary forensics actually show. Governments do not need a crisis to steal purchasing power. They need only patience, a printing press, and a population that confuses the number in their bank account with the value it represents. The distinction between those two things is the entire ballgame. Part 1. The mechanism. They named price stability, Washington, D.C. 2013. The U.S. debt-to-GDP ratio crosses 100% for the first time, according to U.S. Treasury fiscal data. The Federal Reserve's official inflation target remains 2% annually. Analysts describe the economy as recovering. Financial media calls the monetary environment stable. Here is what that 2% number actually means. At 2% annual inflation, the Federal Reserve's explicit stated goal, not a warning sign, the goal, a dollar loses half its purchasing power in approximately 35 years. A worker who saves $100,000 at age 30 and holds it in cash to retirement at 65 will have the same nominal $100,000. Its real purchasing power will have been cut nearly in half. The theft is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It moves at the speed of a glacier. Imperceptible in any single month, catastrophic across a lifetime. And here is the detail most financial commentary never frames directly. Governments holding large debt obligations denominated in their own currency have an institutional incentive to maintain inflation. When the currency loses purchasing power, the real value of outstanding government debt shrinks with it. The borrower, the state, benefits. The lender, the saver, absorbs the loss. The Federal Reserve's own balance sheet data, tracked through Fred at the St. Louis Federal Reserve Bank, shows this is not theoretical. It has been the operating condition of U.S. monetary policy for most of the past 15 years. This is the first principle the forensic record establishes. Inflation is not a bug in the monetary system. For indebted governments, it is a feature. Part 2. 5 signals that precede acceleration. Here is where the pattern becomes operationally useful, because the slow theft of 2% annually is one thing. What the historical autopsies show is that this mechanism does not run at constant speed. It has phases, and those phases leave fingerprints. Weimar Germany did not go from stable to 4.2 trillion marks per dollar in a single step. Neither did Argentina, neither did Hungary. In each case, the sequence produced traceable signals. The people who acted on them preserved their capital. Everyone else watched it vaporize. Signal 1. The debt-to-GDP ratio crosses a structural threshold and stops being addressed. According to U.S. Treasury fiscal data, U.S. debt held by the public crossed 100% of GDP in 2013. As of 2024, the Congressional Budget Office estimates total gross federal debt at approximately 124% of GDP. The CBO's own January 2025 baseline projects that figure will continue rising throughout the following decade, when a government stops treating its debt trajectory as a problem requiring structural resolution, only rolling projections and short-term targets. It has implicitly decided the resolution will be monetary. The historical precedent for that decision is universal, and the outcome is always the same. Signal 2. The central bank becomes a significant buyer of its own government's debt. According to Statista data sourced from the Federal Reserve, before the 2008 financial crisis, the Fed's balance sheet held approximately $900 billion in total assets. By the peak of COVID-era expansion in 2022, it had reached $8.9 trillion, nearly a tenfold increase in 14 years. During the COVID pandemic alone, the balance sheet expanded from $4.3 trillion to $8.9 trillion in under 2 years. When a central bank buys government debt at scale, it is creating new money to finance government spending. The technical term is monetization. The outcomes in every historical case precede it. Signal 3. Real interest rates turn and stay negative. A real interest rate is the nominal rate minus inflation. When your savings account pays 0.5% and inflation runs at 4%, your real rate is negative 3.5%. You are effectively paying to hold your own money in an institution. The Federal Reserve maintained real interest rates at or below zero for most of the decade between 2010 and 2022. Negative real rates are not neutral policy. They are a transfer mechanism, from savers and creditors to borrowers and governments. The saver funds the resolution. They simply are not told they are doing so. Signal 4. The official measurement of inflation begins diverging from lived experience. The Bureau of Labor Statistics publishes the Consumer Price Index as the official measure of inflation. That index has undergone significant methodological revisions since the 1980s. Substitution effects, hedonic quality adjustments, geometric weighting. Each individual change had defenders. The cumulative effect is a CPI that consistently produces lower readings than the pre-revision methodology would. When the measurement of the theft becomes politically managed, the theft can accelerate without the headline number changing. Signal 5. The currency loses reserve status at the margin. According to the Federal Reserve's own published research from July 2025, the U.S. dollar's share of disclosed global official foreign exchange reserves was approximately 58% in 2024, down from a peak of 72% in 2001. The IMF's COFR data for mid-2025 shows that share declining further to approximately 56%, a 30-year low. No single year is dramatic. The trend across 25 years is not ambiguous. When central banks globally reduce their dollar holdings, they are expressing a collective judgment about future purchasing power. They are acting on the same signals listed above, with the institutional capacity to act before most individuals realize a decision needs to be made. Part 3. The Architecture of Invisible Extraction. Here is what the full forensic record shows across every case, from Hungary 1946 to the American post-2008 monetary expansion. Governments do not need to confiscate wealth directly. They need only maintain a monetary system in which the medium of exchange slowly loses the purchasing power its holders believe it holds. The mechanism requires no legislation beyond the founding mandate of the central bank. It requires no public announcement. It requires only that the population continue to believe the number in the account represents a fixed claim on real goods and services. It does not. It never has. It is a conditional claim on purchasing power that the issuing authority continuously adjusts through a mechanism that does not appear on any bank statement, does not generate a tax form, and is described in official communications as a feature called price stability. Now consider what this means in practical fiscal terms today. In fiscal year 2024, for the first time in U.S. history, the federal government spent more on interest payments on its national debt than on national defense. According to the Congressional Budget Office, net interest on the public debt reached approximately $950 billion in FY 2024, against Pentagon spending of $826 billion. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget has noted that interest payments on the public debt surpassed $1 trillion for the first time in FY 2025. The CBO's 10-year baseline projects those payments will reach $1.5 trillion by 2032 and $1.8 trillion by 2035. That trajectory creates a mathematical trap. If interest rates stay elevated to fight inflation, the government's borrowing costs compound further. If rates fall to reduce those costs, inflation returns. Every lever makes one part of the problem worse. Irving Fisher, the Yale economist who watched the Great Depression unfold in real time, described the outcome of that trap in 1933. He called it the debt deflation spiral. When debt levels become so extreme that the cost of servicing them consumes the budget, governments exhaust their conventional options and turn to the printing press. Fisher watched it happen. He had been, incidentally, one of the economists who declared in September 1929 that stock prices had reached a permanently high plateau. 9 days later, the market crashed. The mistake was identical to the one every credentialed institution makes before every major collapse: measuring the stability of the current moment and extrapolating it forward without measuring the fragility accumulating underneath. The principle. Beneath the pattern, Tibor, the hardware shop owner in Budapest, understood one thing. Margit, the school teacher, did not. Money is not wealth. Money is a representation of wealth denominated in a unit the government controls. When the government adjusts the unit, the representation changes. The underlying wealth, copper wire, pipe fittings, skills, productive land, does not change because nobody can print another acre of farmland and nobody can quantitatively ease a plumber's apprenticeship. The Roman Emperor Caracalla began debasing the denarius in 215 AD. He reduced its silver content gradually over the following decades. Roman citizens holding denarii watched their coins retain their shape, their stamps, their official face value. The silver, the thing with intrinsic purchasing power, was quietly removed. The coins looked the same. They spent at the official rate. Every merchant in the empire understood, at some level, that the substance had changed. It took generations for most citizens to update their mental model to match the new reality. By the time they did, the wealth had already transferred. The modern version of this process does not require a die and a smelter. It requires a press release, a parliamentary mandate, and a statistical agency. The question is not whether this process is running right now. The IMF's COFER data, the Federal Reserve's own balance sheet records, the Congressional Budget Office's projections, and the U.S. Treasury's debt tracking all confirm that it is. The question is the same one Tibor asked in Budapest in 1944 when the pengo was still functioning, still officially stable, still universally accepted. What do you actually own? Not what does your account say you own, not what the nominal number represents. What is the underlying claim? And is that claim denominated in something a government can print? History has been answering this question in the same language for 2,000 years. Across every continent, every language, every monetary regime, the answer has never changed. It is just that each generation has to learn to read it themselves. Subscribe. We perform monetary autopsies here, so you understand the mechanism before you become the case study.